Hello and welcome to another video. So we're taking a look at some of the first cards revealed for, of course, Rebirth of Glory. So that should be fairly interesting at least. So one of the first cards here is Levin Archer. Is a 2-drop 2/2 bronze for Swordcraft. It does have the trait for Levin, which is a very interesting trait overall. I mean, we always had the Sky Knights, Levin Saber, stuff like that worked out. So seeing it as a trait doesn't surprise me. Then we have, of course, its evolve effect. If there are any 11 cards in your hand, deal 3 damage to an enemy follower. So that's fairly decent, fairly straightforward one. Basing it on hand effect makes it very easy to pull off early game and doesn't rely on you sticking something else to the board. So a very effective 2-drop for an Evo. Definitely worthy of being a bronze though. I feel like it's probably not going to be super overpowered unless, of course, the 11 archetype itself gains a lot of overpoweredness to it. I think straight up as it is, it's definitely a good bronze. As far as 11 archetype goes, so far what's revealed, unless we get an absolute massive amount of them, I can see it definitely sitting in a deck because you would need it for the combo, so that could work out. Then we have Albert, 11 Champion. This was one of the first ones, of course, revealed. It is a 5-drop 3/5 standard Albert stats with some nice alternate art there, and of course it is also 11 since, of course, he was always set up like that. And it does have Storm, which is actually pretty cool. So Albert getting his Storm back is a very, very interesting choice, especially for a 5-drop. It does have Fanfare, Enhance 9, randomly put a different 11-month follower, excluding Albert 11 Champion, from your deck into play until your area is full. So effectively making him a Enhanced turn 9 Arthur, which is pretty crazy for 11, which is actually awesome. Strike, so that's whenever this follower attacks, gain +1 if another allied 11 card is in play. So working on that, that's pretty good. I mean, at best then, you could, with an Evo, potentially, just with this card alone, you could pull off an easy 6 damage without any real issue. So pretty cool card overall and has a pretty good effect, especially considering the Enhanced 9. It might be a little slow considering what Sword usually does, but I remember Arthur was pretty dominating as far as that went, so if it takes that kind of spot and we see enough synergy, it could be insane. Then we have a Geno 11 Stalwart. So this was a pretty predictable one when you start seeing, you know, sword cards getting redone. So a 2-drop 2/2 silver card 11. Geno was, of course, having to be done. Can evolve an allied 11 follower, excluding a Geno 11 Stalwart, each turn for 0 evolution points until the Stalwart leaves play. So a very cheap free evo effect. Again, if they get a lot of support for this trait, it could be pretty insane. Gathered by the cards we've seen so far, they've got pretty strong effects when they synergize well. Of course, it would require building a deck mostly around these. If some of the older cards get support for this trait, like say Mysteria did, we could be in for a very interesting time, especially in the unlimited format. Then, of course, we have Hades, a Father of Purgatory. It is a 12-drop 6/6 legendary for Shadowcraft. It does have Accelerate 6. Deal 3 damage to all followers, summon a Path to Purgatory, put a 7 play point Hades Father of Purgatory without Excel into your hand. Sorry, into your deck, not into your hand. Get that right. Anyway, into your deck. So, last word, summon a Path to Purgatory, gain 6 shadows. So, a very decent last word effect to get extra paths out. So, you can pretty much guarantee getting at least 2 paths with this card on its own, since you would get the Accelerate 6 and then play this, of course. There are other options, I think, for Shadowcraft. I haven't delved into Shadowcraft's cards super well for memory, but there was some 12-drop support that was in a couple of the crafts, so it could be really interesting to see how this would go with Shadowcraft like that, being, of course, that Path to Purgatory was originally a neutral card, and this is now a Shadowcraft one, so should be quite interesting. Then we have a Ginger, Cursed World, a 9-drop 5/5 legendary for Runecraft. Fanfare, put a Ginger's Curse into your hand. During your turn, whenever an allied follower evolves, subtract 1 from the cost of this card. So it does have a cost reduction mechanic attached to it. Of course, that is tied to allied followers evolving. So that's a little interesting. The Ginger's Curse we'll take a look at in a moment, but the evolve effect is give your leader the following effect. At the start of your turn, put a Ginger's Curse into your hand. This effect is not stackable. So for a 9-drop, as far as this goes right now, it's pretty average. It's most likely meme tier as it stands, but with the Ginger's Curse being a 0-drop spell, change the cost of a follower in your hand to 1 and change its attack and defense to 1. That could be really interesting. This could open up some really interesting combo potential with certain cards, especially things like Clark, which is a pretty powerful card on its own now as a gold, since it of course has the 10 drop enhance, the 10 drop base effect, and then it has an excel, so that definitely makes this kind of card really good at getting play points back. You can pretty much go for a turn 10 play and get both this and him out at the same time, but obviously I would have to really mess around with this card to see if it has any major potential to be overly competitive in style. Ginger had a bout for a while where it was reasonably competitive, but then it really fizzled out quick with a couple of nerfs and it was kind of sad. So I don't know if this Ginger in particular will end up with the same sort of treatment or if it will actually be able to succeed. I think this one is very up in the air for me, just looking at what we've got so far and what we already have. I think future cards though could definitely improve on this. Then we have Veteran Vagabond Frog. It is a 3-drop 2/3 bronze for Swordcraft. It is just the officer trait, so back to the normal traits for Sword. Fanfare, gain ambush until the end of your opponent's turn, so it's not a permanent ambush effect, which is kind of sad. Enhance 6, gain a +2/+2, so it's really just a stat boost on 6, which honestly I don't think +2/+2 on 6 is that worthwhile. It is nearly double, which is okay, but I think I'd still rather just play it as a 3-drop, especially when evolved, it's an at the end of your turn gain ambush like the traditional Vagabond Frog was. So I would love to include this in an Ambush Sword deck. Ambush Sword can be reasonably cheap, and this being a bronze definitely will help support that. So definitely looking forward to giving him a solid go and building another kind of cheap Ambush Sword deck that most likely will use this guy whether as support or as a core card. We'll have to wait and see, but should be quite good. Then we have a Zeus the Supreme, a 10-drop 5/5 legendary card for neutral, as the original Zeus was for neutral. It is a fanfare. Randomly activate one of the following effects X times. X equals the number of allied followers evolved during this match. So before we move on to what those effects are, to clarify that first part of the effect, there has been a video that's gone out about how this card works. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend seeing it. I may leave a link in the description. If not, you should be able to find it on Twitter pretty easily, just searching through Shadowverse stuff at the moment. As this card actually doesn't just activate one effect X times, it'll trigger the main effect. So it should have really been segmented a little bit with the fanfare wording. So randomly activate one of the following effects X times, hence where there's a full stop. So that's that. Then X equals the number of allied followers evolved during this match. So the problem is the 1. It really should have been activate any of these X time or something along those lines. I don't know. There's people have come up with ways that it should have been worded better, but basically you can trigger any of these effects. So you could actually potentially trigger all of them one after the other, which would be really cool if you could manage to pull that off. Ideally, you want to trigger, of course, the Storm effect, Bane effect, or Ward effect. Preferably Ward and Storm, I think, are the best two. Healing is also pretty decent, so those are nice. But if you can trigger the Gain +3, the Gain +2/+1 and Storm, which, of course, the previous one also gives you Ignoring Ward, and basically just cream the face with it, you could be looking at a very powerful card as just an instant turn 10 finisher, especially if a craft like Dragon can take advantage of it, which typically they have shown to take advantage of big 10-drop win conditions quite easily. So I definitely think this guy is stronger, if not almost always stronger than the original Zeus, even if you only go for 3 evos in your whole game, which is getting to be harder to only do 3 or 2 evos, since of course there are so many free evo mechanics now. You could definitely pull this off. Pretty fun time, so hopefully that'll be a little more interesting. Although the normal Zeus does have a pretty decent body. This one is only a 5/5, so I think they could be equal depending on the deck you're using for sure. But definitely an interesting card, and I hope that the wording could be more clarified, as they do always write all stats and abilities subject to change, so maybe they could just reword that to make it a little clearer. Then we have Auto Blade Patroller? We'll go Patroller. I think it's Patroller, so like, yeah, okay, I get it now. Patroller, we got it. We got there eventually. Anyway, it's a 3-drop 2/2 gold for Swordcraft. It is a Machina card. It is a fanfare. If you have at least 2 other Machina cards in your hand, gain +2/+2. Evolve if another allied Machina follower is in play. Destroy the enemy follower. So pretty straightforward effect. I mean, getting the buff is good, especially since it's a hand effect again. Sword seems to be using a lot of those hand effects, which is interesting. And the evolve effect, being able to destroy, it reminds me of Red Riding Hood and things like that did a really good job at destroying things. And we have Aerial Craft, a 4-drop 3/4 gold for Portalcraft. It is also a Magina card. It is a fanfare, enhance 7, gain a +1/+1 and Storm. So enhance 7 is pretty average, I think. And Strike is subtract 1 from the cost of all Magina cards in your hand. And then it retains that, of course, Strike ability. into the next effect. So whenever this follower attacks, you basically get to subtract 1. It'll be interesting to see if this actually has any kind of relevance in the meta, as you could definitely pull this off on turn 4, potentially get at least 1 boost out of it, maybe even 2 if you're lucky, and have a really fun time overall with this card, as it's definitely got some potential to create another big swarming portal deck if we have enough support for the archetype going forward still, and they don't just kind of abandon it next expansion, or they don't bring out many more this expansion, so should be quite interesting. And we have a Mechaclaw Elf, so this is of course a Machina follower as well. It is a 3-drop 3/3 bronze Forestcraft card. Fanfare, if another Machina card was played this turn, gain Storm. This is actually fairly decent, especially going in those aggro forest decks in rotation. I could see this being really solid for that sort of variant. I've played a fair few basically mech ones that were really good for forest, and they were really solid. They just needed a little bit extra reach, I think, to pull off some wins. Usually I would get them down to 1 or 2 health and then be just crushed by some ward or something that I couldn't get around, but this card potentially could have the potential to get that extra damage in early that could have really closed out a lot of the games that I've tried. So this card for a bronze I think is really good. Then we have Dryad of the Grove. It is a 5-drop 4/4 bronze for Forestcraft. It is Fanfare. Put 2 fairies into your hand. Clash. Give the enemy follower -2 and -0, and it retains, of course, its Clash on Evo. So I think this thing might be a little too high cost for its effect. It's not necessarily bad. Fairies can be quite good. There are some good fairy decks out there that can work with getting extra ones in your hand. Clash effect is okay, potentially letting you get over a fair few followers, maybe even going 2 for 1 against most, but for a 5 cost, it just to me feels a little awkward. I almost would have preferred if this was a 4 cost that retained the 4/4 stat line, but then only evo to a 5/5 and lost the extra little bit of evo stat for that extra 1 cost, as it just would have been, it would have felt a lot nicer at least, or maybe even a 4-drop 3/4. It probably still would have been a really good card and got over a lot of things, so hopefully we can see better cards as far as these ones go, as I think some fairy support could be quite interesting for rotation at least. I'm not a big fan of course, things like Roach in Unlimited. They frustrate me quite a bit, but in rotation I would like to see Forest come back with something, even if it's just aggro Forest would be quite awesome. So that is all the cards I've got for you guys today. Looking at them, I'm sure there'll be more released very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if some go up just after this video or immediately tomorrow like they always do. As always, I'll be covering them in groups of around 10 to 15. I like to cover them in those big chunks so we actually have a decent video out of it. And hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time guys, see ya.